I know a man who has been doing real love for several years, but his wife, Celia, has so far in all this time refused to participate and even gets kind of critical and I would say condescending, but it's closer to snotty at times. And he writes, and he says, "First, I want to say that Celia has definitely grown and has reasonably consistently followed me as I have changed how I parented the kids." So that's a good thing. Both partners don't have to be heavily involved in real love to change a family. Sometimes one just benefits from the change of the other. We've come a long way, and we've cleared out a mountain of conditional love and unloving behaviors in our house, and I'm just telling you that sort of like as context. And that's nice to hear. It's more than I knew before. Last I heard, it was not this good. Additionally, I'm really committed to this. When Celia is not in fear and victimhood, she can be a delight to be around. You get rid of fear and victimhood, most people are a delight. That's like, he's a real delight, except for when he has an M60 in his hand. It's an absolute joy to just watch her being herself. People lose their fears, that's what they get. The prize isn't some external artificial reward. They get to be themselves. That's the prize for losing fear. That's the prize for accepting love and trusting. And man, it's just the most powerful, cool thing there is. On the whole, most people spend their entire lives, most as in 99% of people spend their entire lives just reacting to pain rather than being themselves. So what a sad waste. So the writer says she still continues to stay stuck in her victimhood, and she feels victimized. So notice when somebody has a partner who isn't really involved in real love, notice the contradictions. Doing way better, clearing out the house of unloving behaviors, and then 5 sentences later he says she continues to stay stuck in her victimhood. It can be very confusing. And people who, the partner who is doing real love tends to be either really pessimistic and critical of their partner or really optimistic. Things are going great, which means that she hasn't attacked him in the last 3 hours. So he says she continues to stay stuck in her victimhood, and she feels particularly victimized by my business. I made some pretty stupid choices before real love when I was afraid. I poorly invested money, for example. I invest in real estate and buy houses and flip them and something. I don't really know what he does in real estate, so I'm really kind of making half that up. She acts victimized by the mistakes that I made years ago, despite my consistently becoming less fearful and not making the same mistakes. Yesterday, I talked to her about buying some property, and she just completely withdrew. It was like talking to a wall. So, yeah, things have improved in the house, but boy, victimhood is just a terrible cancer. It's very difficult to root out of somebody unless they're really serious about doing it. She's just afraid. Victimhood always comes from fear. So what are some first steps you can take? First, you have to not be afraid, like at all. If you're afraid, that's all a victim needs as an excuse to just full-blown victim attack. And you're progressing. That's lovely. And eventually, in addition to your progress, you've got to talk to her about her fear, or fear just sits there. It doesn't get better with time. It rots, it stinks, it gets worse, and poisons everything that you do with her. So at some point, you're going to have to talk to her, even though she really doesn't like it, because it's poisoning not just her, but it's affecting you and it's affecting the kids. You continue, I wonder if I could now take a position with her like this. What if I were to say this, quote, you have 2 choices here, only 2. 1, I involve you in business discussions and we have a meaningful discussion where you don't act like a victim about the past, or 2, I'll just make the decisions about business. It's primarily his business anyway. She just gets involved mostly in hearing about the decisions. I'll make the decisions, and I just won't involve you anymore. I would love to involve you, but it's too difficult for me when you withdraw and complain and act victimized. Well, that's brilliant. Everybody who's listening, I would recommend saying exactly that. One of the biggest reasons that people act like victims and stomp out of the room and pout and sulk is precisely so you won't talk to them about their behavior. Because who wants to talk to a pouting, sulking, withdrawing person? They're not being held responsible. In life, you can make any choice you want to, but there's always a consequence, not for a victim. Victims make their choices, their irresponsible choices, and then they expect you to pay for their irresponsible choices or their irresponsible behavior. So yeah, say that. The approach of the victim, in this case, your wife, is never to make the difficult decisions. They just let you make them, and then they criticize them. It's incredibly lazy. And you can tell her that. You can say, you don't make any of the decisions, you don't go find the properties, you don't do any of this work, but whatever decision I make, you can find something wrong with it. That's not going to work. And it never ends with victims. All they do is find fault. They don't do any real work. They just complain, which is obviously staggeringly irresponsible. You continue, my coach has said that I'm not seeing or communicating with her pain, so I need to do that better. Maybe. But victims are just, you sympathize with the victim's pain, and victims will tell you, well, I would listen to you if you would just hear my pain. And I said to a woman one day, honey, I've been listening to your pain for 2 days. Your husband's been listening to your pain for 20 years. You don't want somebody to listen to your pain. You want somebody to worship your pain. And until people have erected altars all over the world to your pain and sacrificed animals and small children, then you don't consider the debt paid and you continue to act like a victim. He continues, I buy and sell properties though, and every time she becomes afraid, if I move ahead, she says, oh, well, you don't care how I feel. See how victims do? You can't make a right move. So if you move ahead without telling her, she's victimized. If you tell her, she's victimized because she's afraid, and it's always somebody else's fault. You continue. So I try to care how she feels by talking to her, but then she just withdraws and does not participate. I'm confused. When do I say that I've proven that I'm willing to do something different, that I'm a more careful investor, that I'm being more loving to her and to the kids? But when do I tell her that she just flat refuses? I'm not quite sure I know the most loving thing here. Do it now. She has proven, she's had years to learn this. She's had years to observe that you have changed, that the kids are different, that your investing is different. And now it's time to talk to her. Do it. Not kidding. If you put it off, time never teaches victims. Eventually, at some point, they have to bottom out. They have to lose their marriage. Many of them have to lose their kids. They have to lose their health before they'll ever admit it. But most victims never recover, ever, because the sicker they get, the older they get, the more difficulties they get, the more reason they have to complain. So they use it just to reaffirm that they are victims. But she's proven that she only wants to complain, which is not participating or helping. She says she wants to participate. You have to have the guts to say complaining is not participating. Whining is not participating. Withdrawing is not participating. Complaining is not a plan. You present her with an investing plan, and she just complains and thinks that's a plan. Well, I don't like your plan. Well, it's not a whole lot of work to that. I can say I don't like to anything. So say to her the stuff that you just wrote above. You've tried listening. You've tried telling her. You've tried not telling her. Nothing works. She says that you don't care about her feelings. But what she really means is that what she would say if she had the ability, if she listened, is that she is afraid, and the choices you make involve risk, and she does nothing to reduce her fears around risk. Instead, she wallows in her fears. She's also telling you to do nothing that might make her feel afraid. This is the rallying cry of the victim. You made me feel whatever. But in this case, for you to do nothing that makes her afraid, that would mean making no investments. And then you'd have no living. And then she'd have no house and no food to feed the kids. And then she'd complain about that. See the position of the victim? No matter what they say, it's never a solution. If you were to follow the victim's advice, in every case, it leads to a bad end. So you can't make money in your career without risk. It's impossible. And you need to tell her that her problem is not your investing. Sure, you made mistakes years ago. Who hasn't? It's her fears, and you can't back down. And if she leaves the room, you say, fine, but we're going to continue this as soon as I see you again. You have to keep this conversation going until she hears you. And then tell her she has those two choices above. Participate like a partner or stay out of the whole thing. And yes, I have previously said on other occasions in many video chats, books, blogs, that in partnership, in true partnership, you take no action unless you both agree. For things like vacations, buying items of high cost, loaning money to kids, partners agree before they take action. This is an exception. This is a business where decisions have to be made to survive, and victims will never make difficult decisions. So you'd starve to death. So she won't make the decision, and since she won't, she's given up the right, she doesn't realize it, but she has, she's given up the right to be your partner in at least business. You have to pretty much divorce her as a partner because she can't participate as one. You didn't make that decision. She did a long time ago not to be a partner. You're simply finally getting some brains in your head and accepting the fact that she's never going to be one. Somebody has to make the decisions, and it has to be you. She's already proven she can't. You continue. She feels victimized by anything that's labeled real love. So in the past, I've restricted the amount of events that I go to, real love events, out of fear of her victimhood. But then I become more fearful. Then I feel less loved, and then it's destructive to our relationship. Exactly. You're making the same point again. Victims complain about everything you do to try to make things better, but they have no plan. At least you're trying something different, so do it. This is a case where you don't need to have the agreement of your partner because they've withdrawn from the partnership. Their plan is to do nothing but complain. As you said, the family is overall better. And you said you've cleared a lot of fear and reactions out of the family. So the love is working. And despite her objections, you have to keep going. Why? Again, I emphasize it again because this is such a pernicious, horrifying disease. Because she's afraid. And in that condition, she can't move. And somebody has to. So you move. And she is slowly following and complaining. But you've got to keep moving. So you said, I'm going to tell her that I'm going to go to every single real love event that I can. Good for you. It makes you happier. The family is happier. And see, she is going to complain whether you go or you don't go. So you just as well go and benefit the family. She doesn't have a plan. You do. You said she refuses to agree to a list of jobs or tasks that we're responsible for. In other words, just kind of the division of labor. I'll mow the lawn, you do the dishwasher. She refuses to agree to a list of jobs. Notice, this is exactly what she does in everything in life. She refused to agree to a task, but then she's filled with expectations of me, And by not having something agreed to, it means that she can exercise her expectations and claim to be victimized by me. Same old victim stuff. And for everybody who's listening, if you don't see a part of you and your partner or your partner this, you're not seeing. They only complain. So what do? Just like with your business, you come up with the list of jobs or tasks. Really, she won't do it, so you do it. Here are my tasks. Here are your tasks. You assign yourself what is reasonable, and then you simply tell her that the rest of the tasks are hers. Oh, well, I don't like, oh, you go, I don't care. You weren't willing to participate in this, so I've come up with a list. A plan has to be made. Things have to be done around the house. You have little kids. Chores have to be done. Clothes have to be washed. She's going to really hate it that you give her a list of tasks. But so what? Victims hate every plan or direction. So you got nothing to lose. At least you'll know your jobs. You have to make the decisions about jobs and investing and everything else because she is emotionally crippled. If she were sick and confined to a hospital bed, who would do the housework? You, because she's crippled. Who would make the decisions about the kids? You, because she's crippled. And it's the same here. She's emotionally crippled. You say, compared to the average money earner, sole earner in a family, I do a lot around the house. I'm often home for school time. I pick up our daughter from school. Every morning I get the kids ready. I tidy up the kitchen, among other things, make breakfast. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm busy morning to night. What you're doing is a lot. It's a lot more than most partners do. You're the sole money earner, and yet notice you're making breakfast and getting the kids ready. So that kind of begs the question, where's she? And that's a reasonable question. I'm asking the question, and I'm not in your house. I'm not involved. I have no investment. It's up to you how you do the chore list. But if making the kids breakfast is one of her assigned jobs, which is reasonable since you're earning the living, then you let her do it. Now, she's really going to hate this. What if she doesn't? Then you send the hungry kids to wherever she hides in the morning to ask her for breakfast. You say, I don't know where breakfast is. Mommy's fixing breakfast. And you send them to her. And then you go to work. And you know what? She'll learn to make breakfast. They only complain. What you do is never enough. And now you have to start at least requiring that she face it gently, but with no fear. If you back down, that's exactly why victims act like victims. Great opportunities to do this when you talk to her about business stuff. What you are going to do in absence of her having a better plan, when you give her the list of jobs, when she objects, and oh, she's really going to object, let me tell you, like vehemently, violently, so get ready. You calmly, very calmly state that you have tried to get her to participate in the decisions for years. And since she refused, you are moving forward. And because somebody has to. And you don't want to hear the complaints anymore. In fact, you will stop her. She can complain. You can't stop her lips from moving. Well, you can, but most of those ways are illegal. But you won't listen to them. You tell her you will listen only to suggestions that work. To this point, you've been captive to her victimhood forever. He says, one final question. When she whines about how my actions make her feel distant and afraid, what can I do? Well, I just answered that in a lot of ways, and you can, review the recording to get those ways. But additionally, you could tell her that whining is a poison. Victimhood is a poison. So you won't do nothing about it anymore because you won't allow your household, your marriage, and your kids to be poisoned. You wouldn't allow somebody to come in and start a fire in your living room. Well, that's what she does every day with her victimhood. She hurts everybody. So first you'll point it out. If she keeps going, you tell her, then I will leave the room for 10 minutes and come back and we'll try again. You conclude by saying, she hates me withdrawing. She's deadly afraid of being alone. Well, then that makes what I just said all the more useful, doesn't it? If you leave the room, and by the way, she won't believe that you'll do it until you actually do it the first time, she might, because she's afraid of being alone, be motivated to stop complaining. This is hard stuff. But if you do nothing, which is what she would do, you get a life of misery, you get a horrible marriage, and your kids will be crippled for the rest of their lives. And I wish I were making that up. Victimhood is that poisonous. Memorize that. New subject. Today I was prompted to tell my student, I'm a tutor, that he has a natural gift for pronunciation. It was his first day of learning, and I said it in a matter-of-fact way with specific details, just like any other piece of information. It was so cool because he did not react with thank you, as he would always have done with praise, but just said, really? Well, that's cool. And that's very cool of you, honey. You can often tell whether you're giving somebody information or praise by their response. If you praise them, they thank you. If you give them information, they look illuminated. No kidding. The light shines from their eyes. What you did is called loving and teaching. Not praise, just giving information. Beautiful. You say, I must have conveyed it pretty well because he clearly took it as information. He also looked a little bewildered, like he had never experienced something like that before. I'll bet. What does that tell you about the world he lives in, or about the world that everybody lives in? It's kind of sad that there's just praise and criticism. But then I choose not to be sad, because we can make a difference in whatever part of the world we're in. You conclude saying, I think this is loving and teaching. Yeah, you read my mind. How fun. Yeah, you think? It is loving and teaching. And bless you for doing it. You're making a difference in the world. I sometimes hear people bemoan the condition of the world, or they say we must pray for world peace. And I'm going, let's see, moaning doesn't work. And yeah, I believe in prayer, but far more effective than any of those things is make a difference with the person who's standing right in front of you. Love and teach again, and then do it again. That's what will make a difference in the world. This is a woman who's been in real love for some time. And she says, my daughter, Lily, is 9 and has this fear about me or my husband or both of us dying. And sometimes she can get herself into a real state, like tonight. So I hold her and I tell her that, yeah, I could die suddenly, but it's not very likely. And even if I did die, good for you. Good for you not to tell her, oh, I'll never die. Liar. Even if I did, I would always be there in her heart. And I ask her if she believes in God, which turns out she does, and that we'll be together after we die. That's a pretty good response to a 9-year-old. Children have a greater native, innate faith than most of us adults by quite a bit, it turns out. You believe in God, and that we will continue to live when we die. You, the mother, the writer of this. When I was a kid, it was quite a leap of faith to believe in life after death. In fact, people would often in their sermons say, it requires complete faith to trust in a life after this because nobody's been there and come back. They used to say that. I remember being a kid in a church service and hearing that. Well, that's not true anymore. There have now been thousands of near-death experiences recorded. And I've spent time talking with the guy who was the grandfather recording these experiences. Thousands of people have died. And then because of our medical science, been resuscitated and come back and described the next life. And there isn't a tiny little itty-bitty chance in the universe that these are random neuronal discharges. If the brain randomly discharges, you get crazy lights and seizures. That's about it. There's an interesting movie for a child who's 9 years old that would be interesting, called Heaven is for Real. The exact interpretation that the kid has isn't all that important, but it would mean something to a little kid. I think the kid was 4 or 5, died and went into the next life and talked to people, a lot of people. And one of them, he came back and he described to his father, he said one of them's name was Pop, who was his father's grandfather. So his father brought out a picture of his grandfather, and it was, when he was old, wearing glasses and, all wrinkly like I am. And the kid said, "That's not Pop." And so then his father thought, oh. So he went and found a picture of Pop when he was in the military, when he was in his 20s. And the kid said, "That's Pop." He said, "There are no old people there." The kid called it heaven. I don't care what you call it. It's just, there is a life after this one. You'd have to be a scientific fool to deny the evidence. Scientists are particularly skeptical, which is ironic because scientists live by gathering evidence. Well, the evidence is incontrovertible now. So you assure her, that's just a brief little rant to give you the courage to talk to your daughter. You assure her that you will be together. You'll be together forever. If that's what you believe, you teach her that, which means that if you're separated for a few years, it's nothing. Kids love visual demonstrations. Draw her a line on the floor or around the block of eternity, a line that represents eternity, and then show her how much time a few years is. It would be the line you'd make with a needle. It'd be nothing. It'd be less than that. Kids enjoy that kind of stuff. And tell her that this is really an important one. You'll be together, but the only time we really have, I've done this with little kids and they light up. The only time we really have is now. There's no tomorrow. That doesn't exist. There's no past. It's over. So if she chooses to fuss about possibly losing you, then every second that she fusses makes your time together worthless. Lots of metaphors. Kids love metaphors and visual pictures. If she's eating a bowl of ice cream, what would happen if she fusses the whole time and instead of eating the ice cream, fusses and complains with fear over the possibility that she won't have another bowl soon? Well, she'd miss the whole enjoyment of the bowl that she's got in front of her. Or what if she's afraid that the sky is falling, or that an earthquake will swallow her up, or that you're going to die, for example? You don't enjoy anything now if you're fussing about something else. It's like you have no ice cream at all while you're fussing. It's all about enjoying the present, always. This can be a great lesson for kids, not to mention that almost no adults understand this lesson. Even reminder of times, this is going to be an especially fun application. Reminder of times that she has fought you, argued with you, and behaved badly. And then ask her how she felt during those times. During those times, did she appreciate that you weren't dead? No. In fact, I'd be willing to bet, knowing your daughter, that there were times that she told you that she wished you were dead. During those times, there's no ice cream, metaphorically. She can't feel your love. She's throwing away all she has, which is now. You continue. I feel sometimes it's a drama, especially when it comes up at bedtime, which it usually does, but I don't want to be dismissive. Other times I feel that her fear is real. Well, at bedtime, kids are more tired, so if they do have a fear, it's more likely to come up when they're tired. And yes, because I know her, she can be a bit of a drama queen, so she probably does milk this particular, "Oh, I'm afraid you're going to die," so that you'll stay with her a little bit longer. Just be calm and explain it in any number of ways, possibly some of those that I've listed. Those will just get your creativity going so you can give her some more. And yeah, sometimes she's genuinely afraid. So you have the conversation with her about death in the daytime when it won't be putting off her bedtime. And then you can remind her at bedtime instead of explaining the thing all over again, which of course lets her prolong her bedtime. Kids are so clever. I knew a guy and his wife who were having a difficult marriage, and I talked to them years ago. not really even quite sure what my point is here, but I'm going to tell it anyway. She had decided to leave the marriage, and he wanted the marriage to continue. She had already acquired a boyfriend while they were still married, even though she was still living in the home with her husband. He wanted to make the marriage work. I've noticed over the years a difference that's been pretty consistent. It's not 100%, but it's 90+% consistent between guys and women who have affairs. If a guy has an affair, he can go back to a normal relationship with his wife fairly easily. Women, once they have a boyfriend, it's pretty much over. And there are a whole lot of reasons for that. But once they've acquired a boyfriend, you're not going to resurrect that marriage. But of course, she left the marriage, she went with the boyfriend, and she hadn't learned anything. Didn't learn anything about how to have a better relationship. She was just escaping. And I told her and her husband, I said, within a few months of your divorce, you'll have a new boyfriend, and then you'll have another, and then you'll have another, and you'll keep going. Her first boyfriend, the one that she went with to leave her husband, that lasted for 2 months. And then in the last couple of years, she's had 6 since then. You know, if you flee a thing because it's easier for you before you've learned anything, you can flee the lesson, but you're still going to have to learn the lesson. So you can stay and learn it now, which is why I recommend to people that they learn about love before they try the one thing that works. Or you can just keep repeating this mistake. Here's somebody who says, what I'm writing is really short and yet poignant. She says, what I'm writing is not important. The words, I just love writing. I love writing to you. It helps me feel connected. And then I remember that the replies, if you reply to my emails, are just a bonus. Well, then you get the point. The content is so much less important than your knowing that I care about you. Often when people are here for interventions, for example, as I'm speaking to people, as I'm holding their hand, as I'm touching them, sometimes I'll say, you may not have noticed this, but the words I'm saying just don't matter all that much. It's the tone, it's the look on my face, it's the touch of a hand. That should be fairly obvious because that's how we communicate love to babies. Babies don't care what words you're saying. I've never heard of a nursing baby look up at his or her mother and go, the grammar of that sentence wasn't particularly sharp. No, little babies like to be held, talked to, touched, nursed, sung to. They like to hear the tone of our voice. That's what it's really all about. This person continues writing and says, I love talking to you, sharing bits of my life, knowing that there's someone who will look at my words with love and not criticism, just fills me up on its own. Keep in mind, this isn't about me. She just happens to be writing to me. Many of you have received letters similar to this. What she's talking about is love, not me. She said, I often feel completely different from the start to the end of an email. Now remember, I haven't answered her. She's just writing. It's a monologue. I see things more clearly. I find more truth for myself and take more responsibility for my actions just because I wrote. I love where I am right now. I'm happy that it's hard and challenging. I know that I'm in the perfect place that I'm supposed to be, but I don't need to be in this particular place or have any particular thing to be happy. Well, that's pretty amazing. This is called waking up from the dead. Since most people live like they were dead, they just react. She concludes, I'm enjoying the things I'm doing, the people around me. I feel like the luckiest person alive to have found unconditional love. And I know that it's just shown me what I can be like. It's shown me me. It's my job to have faith and share it and serve God in whatever I'm doing and with whoever I'm being with. I love living this way. And I love reading your words. It's very inspiring. It's really fun to watch people's lives change. It's like watching a baby being born many times a day. Just a hoot. Here's somebody who writes, and this is a wise person, if I remember, who says, Suzanne, who is a member of our group, was fired from her job, and she came to group complaining that her boss said that she was not doing a good job, even though Suzanne said that she was. You really have to stop the whining, like as in within the first 30 to 40 seconds. It's a waste. Don't do it. Stop her and ask her how she knows that she was doing a good job, which her boss says she wasn't doing. And then she'll begin to tell you what she did well or what she thinks she did well. Then you stop her again. Wrong. How do you know if you're doing a good job? Because I just can't count how many people think that they are. I talked to somebody today who said, I think I'm doing a much greater job of being a husband. And I said, if you really want to find out, go ask your partner how you're doing. Now, it's even more striking at work because we don't work for our partner. But how do you know if you're doing a good job at work? The boss. Why? Because it turns out that the boss defines what a good job is. I've had uncounted people write and call me and tell me that they're doing a great job, but the boss doesn't appreciate them. People fail to understand that they are paid not to do a particular job, but to satisfy their boss. No kidding. It changes your entire outlook. Talked to a lady yesterday who was complaining about her boss was such a diva and a narcissist and often condescending and sharp-tongued. And I said, all right, so for the rest of today and for tomorrow morning, before I talk to you again, you just decide that you're being paid to do exactly what your boss wants. Now, you're not being paid for your boss to hit you or abuse you, but to do what he wants, even if he's kind of a jerk. She did that. The next day she said, wow, that was a much easier day. Yeah, because she'd spent all this time resenting him for being a jerk. Bosses get to be jerks. There are plenty of them. Plenty of jerks among those who are not bosses too. The reality is, it's our job to satisfy the boss. You can be clever and productive, and yet if you don't do it the boss's way, you lose. And you just keep repeating that to the member of your group. The boss, it turns out, is pretty much, with almost no exceptions, always right. Why? Because the boss was given the job to define what is right, not Suzanne, the member of your group. Suzanne, in this case, is entirely wrong. And tell her that. 100% wrong. Doesn't matter what she thinks about her job, only what the boss says. So what does this have to do with love? If you care about Suzanne's happiness, you will help her, or at least try to help her, eliminate the obstacles that she experiences to her happiness. And this is a big one. Her victimhood, her need to control things. She sees things only her way. And I suspect that she does it not just to work. The group leader says, Suzanne has a tendency to think everyone else is wrong and she is right and does not take other people's opinions or ideas very well. As you probably remember in her email to you a while back, until you said that, I'd forgotten that she'd emailed me. But I do now. And she didn't listen to a single word I said. And she took offense, and she attacked me, and she defended herself and was flippant and snotty. So if she won't listen to me, what chance do you think you have? She told me that I didn't understand real love, and just sort of blew me off. So don't get too invested in her getting it. Just keep repeating the truth. Suzanne, the boss defines your job. Until you can admit that you were wrong and the boss is right, You'll keep repeating this mistake, and there's nothing I can do to help you. Stop her whining. Victims, we've talked about them several times in this particular video chat. Victims consume a family. Their cancer eats up their partners and their kids, and they ruin everything around them. It's just a real cancer. You conclude, I think she thought that her boss didn't know what she was talking about. Well, she thinks nobody but her knows anything about anything. I talked to her. I didn't know anything. Her boss talked to her. Her boss didn't know anything. And if you talk to her, you're not going to know anything either. So be prepared for it, but stop the victimhood, or it will eat up your group. Interested to hear how that goes. I heard from a mother in Real Love, and she wrote, in fact, she's the mother who wrote the lullaby that's on the website. It's a Real Love lullaby, which I think is just cool as can be. It never occurred to me to write one. If you go to the website, at the bottom, let's see, no, if you go to the top of the website, the Real Love website, there is a tab called About Us, right? Then if you put your cursor over that, there's a drop-down menu, and one of the items is newsletter sign up. You click on that. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, do it, because if you've gotten the newsletter, you've already gotten the lullaby. And then go down to the lower left corner, if I remember, at least on my computer screen, and it will say latest newsletter. And there's a link that will take you to the lullaby, which is just darling. But she wrote several days later. She said, for the past week, my son has asked me every night to play a video chat for him to listen to as he falls asleep. A video chat like we're doing, right now. She says, he calls you the man talking about love. This kid is 3 years old, and he's figured this out. It's working like a charm so far. He goes to sleep listening to video chats, and I can only imagine how much his little sponge of a brain is soaking up. Little kids get it. I had a lady write me from Hawaii who ran kind of a little daycare place, and she had quite a few kids who were 2, 3 years old, and they used to ask for the video chats. And one little kid would point at the screen and say, looking at her, and she pointed at the screen and say, he loves me. It has nothing to do with me. Little kids can feel love. They can hear love. They can hear a loving tone. They hear loving words, and they know they're loving even if they don't know the words. So, wow, do we have a powerful effect on our kids? And we really need to pay attention to that. Here's a mother who proves it with a 3-year-old. Here's somebody who says, in my workplace, we help people find jobs and create lives from the disaster of their lives. We help them find housing and stuff like that. We sometimes set up mock interviews to help clients prepare for, real job interviews. And recently, my coworker, we'll call her Louise, set up a session like that and enlisted 3 other people from the office, including one man in our office whose name is Rick. Rick made a joke that I will be the a-hole that that people who are being interviewed all fear. He's pretty insecure, and I think he was trying to buy approval with his humor. Yeah, maybe. And if he's insecure, he was also using this opportunity to make himself feel powerful. Notice he didn't volunteer to be the compassionate one. They did the mock interview. According to others, Rick made one client cry, and he was being painted as a bad guy by one of the other employees, Louise, and the people she told the story to. Incidentally, this young woman that he made cry, 5 months pregnant, also burst into tears at my workshop, talking about how meaningful it would be if she could be the first person in her family to graduate from college. So, yeah, he made a relatively emotionally volatile woman cry. So he probably was a bully, and his victim was very sensitive and vulnerable. Both factors were involved. You continue. Louise, the person who was vilifying Rick as a bully, is also quite a victim and bully. Now, those of us who are listening, notice she said that Louise is quite a victim/bully. Almost all victims are bullies. Remember the lady earlier that we were talking about where her husband was an investor? She didn't just voice a differing opinion. She bullied her husband with her complaining and her disapproval. See, victims genuinely believed that they've been done wrong. They've been hurt. And so that justifies every way that they would treat other people. And they tend to be exactly what they're telling other people that they're doing to them. They're bullies. They're mean-spirited. They do all the stuff that they accuse everybody else of. You continue. She's the person who sits right next to me that I've told you about before, prone to making deep sighs while she works. And you've known those people. Anytime anything happens they don't like, so that everybody will look at them and go, oh, you poor little baby, and, dab their forehead with a towel. So at some point, she went around the partition that separates us from Rick and confronted and lectured him about how his approach was wrong. How ironic is that? Like the parents who yell in anger at their children who are fighting with each other. He defended himself, and everybody in the office could hear the interchange. It was most unpleasant, as Louise used flowery psychobabble language while she basically bullied him. Depends on, so what do? You ask. Depends on whether you're in a supervisory position with Louise. If you're not, you could later, when the tirade is over, not during, ask her if she wants a suggestion about what just happened with Rick. You could make a suggestion. You could recommend that she read the victim book. I can predict that neither of those will probably be very well received, because victims don't well receive anything except praise. You could talk with her at work. If you could talk to her later on the phone, you choose. If you're her supervisor, then you take her into your office and you tell her that this is unacceptable behavior, that she can't do that. I've supervised, hundreds of people over the years as their employers. I didn't mind if people made mistakes. I didn't mind if they hadn't learned to do something yet. Mistakes were nothing. But if people acted like victims or whined or complained, they got one warning. And I let them know that that kind of poison would destroy the office and they couldn't do it. They didn't have an improvement period where they could tone it down. They couldn't ever do it again. I only ever had to fire one person for that, because they noticed that the entire rest of the office doesn't do it. And then they sort of stuck out like a sore thumb. You can't permit this at work. If she talks about her pain or Rick or her feelings, you get to teach her as much as she can possibly hear, because this is just too dangerous. Destroy your workplace. You continue. Both of their pain is pretty obvious to me, and I wondered if there was any appropriate role I could play in helping them. It changed into a kind of Cold War after that, and Rick has refused to acknowledge or speak to Louise. Yeah, no surprise there. Victims come to some sort of détente eventually. Today, Louise sought me out and asked for help with a communication issue with her coworker. I acknowledged that I heard the encounter, and I asked her what she wanted. She was open to learning some real love principles, and I also let her know that if she wanted to try to talk with Rick, I would be willing to be with them. Well, that's exactly what I was talking about. I hadn't read far enough down. Pour it on, kid. If she's willing to learn, give her a book to read, offer her to do a conversation with both her and Rick, mediate in such a way that they can both see how they could possibly do it better the next time, and how what they did this time affected the other person. Rather than say, it was wrong, or you were a victim, Show them how it affected other people. People like labels right off. Anything you would suggest. She does seem somewhat open, but I don't entirely trust her motivations. This is the woman whose husband is so insecure that he can't order coffee at a drive-through window. Very sad, but may be willing to learn. You can imagine if she beats up on people, if she's a victim and a bully, that how could the man order coffee at a drive-through window? If he made a mistake, she'd pour it on his lap. But she might be willing to learn. She brought it up with you. You continue. She's expressed some trust in me, so I'm going to bring Real Love in the Workplace tomorrow and see if she wants to read it. Well, bless your heart. You're making a difference in the world. That's just very cool. Most people can't claim that. Here's somebody who writes, another thing I do is spend a lot of time in bed. This was obviously cut out of the middle of an email, or it wouldn't have started off with another thing I do. It's where I feel comfortable and safe. Less fear, I suppose. But then the other reason is because I don't alternatively know how to spend my time when I'm not at work, or in the fear that it might be something out of my comfort zone. If you want to be happy, and only if you do, and I assume that you do or you wouldn't be writing, that would need to change. You'd need to work with some people in a group, with a coach or whatever, to abolish your fears completely. That has to change first, not activities to do out of bed, because you'll still be afraid. And then you just start trying new things. It doesn't take long. Pick up any magazine, especially go to Pinterest and look up interesting activities outside. There will be 20,000 of them or more. Outdoor things, exercise, reading, something. Or fear will re-paralyze you and you'll wonder where your life went. I can't tell you how many people get to be 65 years old and call me and say, I just realized that my whole life has slid by. What do I do about it? So you don't want that to have that experience. No criticism of you, just wanting you to experience a full life. You say, I also see it as making my day go quicker when I'm in bed. Something I always want to do because I don't enjoy things. I'm lethargic. I'm unenthusiastic. This is particularly highlighted when I'm off work. I notice this and I'm beating myself up for it, but I also want to make a change. Ironically, my biggest fear around this is my husband. I know this is a behavior that he finds difficult, yet his judgment around my staying in bed causes more fear in me to want to continue the hiding. So I stay in bed to keep from making mistakes. I stay in bed to pass the time. I stay in bed because I don't know what else to do. And I stay in bed to avoid his judgment. And his judgment is about my staying in bed. You see what a horrible, vicious cycle this is? We went for a walk the other day where I shared my fears around not contributing enough and his judgments of me. And he immediately then tried to teach me. So I responded with, I'm not really trying to be taught here. I'm just sharing my fears. So we walked in silence for the rest of the walk. Can you help me with this one? So you're going to need to find another source of love, kid. You need to find somebody who loves you unconditionally, where you feel like it sinks down to your bones. Then when you talk to your husband about your fears, you don't need him to love you. You've already said he tends to be judgmental. And I talked to him the other day, and to your husband the other day, and yes, he is. So no fear of him, and tell him to leave you alone about this stuff, about this fear stuff. You're going to work with somebody else about it. And then I'll help you find some things you might enjoy, or the people who love you will help you find some things you might enjoy. The more people you talk to, the more interesting activities you'll discover, and possibly with them. Many activities that you wouldn't do alone, you would enjoy doing with somebody else. But if you're afraid, you're kind of screwed. That cycle's got to stop. He has to stop judging you. You've got to find somebody to love you. He's got to stop trying to teach you this stuff. And I would suggest that you have him watch this segment so that he understands what I'm talking about. You continued your email, or conclude your email the other day to make the decision to unilaterally love your partner. So I listen to that. Each day I wake up and I commit to that. But by each lunchtime, I've already failed miserably in some way or other. Kind of like the New Year's resolutions we make, huh? So, which causes me to want to run away and take a break and start again. You'll get to unconditionally loving your husband, but you're not ready yet. You need to have other people love you and trust that they love you. So you find people that love you, you trust them, you remember it, and then slowly you learn to love others, your husband included. These are gradual steps that we all have to learn to take, not just you, and we're all still learning it. We'll see you again next week.